What phrase? Holy days. So you had baked into Israel's calendar, you had these festivals that gave them a chance to, what did those festivals give them a chance to do? To remember, to reflect.
3 R's.
Yeah, what else do you want? The 3 R's. Reflect, rest, remember. Also a time for with each other. Fellowship. Relationship. It's an R. I like it. Now we've got the 4 R's. If Scooby-Doo were here, it'd be Ruh-roh. That would be the 5th R. I don't know. We've got, there's some rituals involved. Exactly. These are things, and ritual is a word that we kind of have an allergy to in our tribe. Because, of course, all rituals are evil and must be destroyed. The reality is God set up things to be done regularly in Israel, hard-baked it into their calendar. Actually, one was hard-baked in every week, Sabbath. So that here's the deal. There are things that they're going to do ritually that are designed to help them remember, to give them a chance for rest. And that rest could only come if their relationship with God was a relationship of trust. Yes. Reliance. Another R. All right. So this whole idea of these things are part of the purposes of those rituals, those times. We have rituals. And again, they serve a purpose too. Okay? And I would suggest, as we've looked at over the time, some of the same purposes. Go back to last week. I know that you've spent 6 full days and a little bit, almost 7 full days now, trying to recover from last week's class, but go back to it for just a minute. So you go back to last week's class. Why do you think we drilled down on the idea of Sabbath last week? Why on earth would we have drilled down on the idea of Sabbath?
What do you mean drill down?
Why did we spend so much time talking about it? Why did we think about how that applies to us, or does it apply to us? Or
One of the only rituals we really have, other than the Lord's Supper, is worship on Sunday. Is kind of a ritual. We don't call it a ritual, but it is.
So Sabbath being one of the only rituals we have, do we feel like that's a ritual we have? Generally speaking? Sometimes it's kind of tough to feel like we have a Sabbath time, a time in which we are just trusting God and working on being human beings instead of human doings. We talked about how with our cell phones we are available 24/7, 365, except in leap years when it's 366. So this notion of having Sabbath seems to be something kind of difficult. Maybe your situation is very different from mine. I grew up in a church, and please never hear any time I say something that might sound critical with a capital C. I'm at best only being critical with a little c. I'm obviously very appreciative of the church setting I grew up in. And so take anything that I say, understanding that those were the people who nurtured me. Those were the people who showed me in the ways that I first saw him, showed me who Jesus was. But one of the things that I remember being taught this is, we're talking about the 10 Commandments. And a point of emphasis was Jesus carried 90% of those forward. What was the 10% that he didn't? Sabbath. That we, for the most part, don't murder. We do not commit adultery, or at least don't admit it. All of the, we could go down the lines, but Sabbath, that doesn't apply to us because Jesus really didn't say anything about that. Okay, Jesus didn't say anything about that. I agree. But what did we notice last week? Jesus did Sabbath. Jesus practiced Sabbath. The idea that Jesus went around and arranged time in his schedule to be with God. He arranged time for rest. He arranged time for that relationship. He arranged time for him and the disciples to be away from the crowds together, to work on that relationship. There is a sense in which, here's the thing, anybody ever feel like your schedule's out of control? And I'm sure there were times when Jesus maybe felt like his schedule was a little bit out of his control. You got a crowd of 5,000 clamoring for your attention, But he not only responds to that crowd, as we saw in one of the texts we looked at last week in Matthew 14, but Jesus also, having encountered that crowd on the way to be alone with the Father, on the way to a moment of Sabbath, as soon as the crowd had been dispersed, and by the way, who dispersed the crowd? Of course, it's Bible class. The answer is Jesus. Yeah, so Jesus, disperses the crowd, and then Jesus goes on to be with God in prayer. Jesus is, whenever he is able, taking charge of his schedule, seeking those moments to work on relationships. And also, amazingly enough, if anybody could have taken a pass on showing up at public worship, it's Jesus, right? I mean, he's Son of God. But it says he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath, as was his custom. This is just what he did. So we feel like, and sometimes I think very justifiably, feel like our schedule's out of our control. Jesus did things to try to gain control of his schedule when it came to the things that were most important. You know the old thing with you put the big rocks in the jar first, then you can put the little rocks and the sand and stuff like that. That was a big rock to Jesus. Did he ever, talk about it and say, you must do this? But hey, if we're supposed to be like Jesus, that's one reason that I wanted us to drill down on that a little bit last week, to look at that a little more deeply. Is number one, I think that's one we tend to ignore for a number of reasons. And certainly our supervisors want us to ignore that one. And then also it is just something that is such a part of, I would say may not be going too far.